what did I do? I went into the library here at Montechinico. For your students, you will have access to that library with your number. And we have a lot of good databases. I like to use the Web of Science, right? You go to the Web of Science. Let's see if internet's okay here. If it's okay, we can do it. Servicios. And then I go to the library. And then I went to electronic resources. Then I go to databases. And I like to use, and then here are our databases. You have access to most of the articles. Some of them, if they're very new, it's not, you don't have access, they have to be paid for. But the very new ones really, here's the Web of Science. I went to Web of Science. You have to give in your numbers. And there we go. I hope it's okay. Remember, so these three means grant for a knowledge-based theory of the firm has a lot of citations, as well as a very important reading that we do here. This is a very important piece for management. It's David Peace. It's Pisano and Schwen. As you can see in this one, look, it took 6 years to be published. 6 years to be published. They gave it into the journal, the Strategic Management Journal. We're in the strategic management literature right now. They gave it in April 1991. And it was and the final version, after corrections, was received in March 1997. And it was published in, well, it doesn't say what month. It took how many years? 6 years to be published. But it's a highly cited article. So what does this highly cited article, here we are, look. What I did that day was the following. I put management, and I put another one, add another field, and organization. I think I did that. And I said, search. Right? And then, there we go. You see? It found 10,000 results. Right? But then I ordered them time-cited. Why? Citations, both in articles, scientific articles, as well as patents. Citations are a measurement of their value.
So it's like, for example, the teenagers' likes?
What?
Like, for example, the teenagers are likes?
Exactly. How many citations does your article have? As you can see here in the Web of Science, most of them are under 100 citations. Okay. Many of them have 0 citations. These articles that we're going to read have more than 4,000 citations.
So it's really good.
So they are very good. Look, what happened?
How many pages?
Per article? 16. So 16, 17.
The articles are usually from 15 to 30 pages.
And they have 100 citations.
4,000, more than 4,000. That's a lot. This thing isn't working very well. There we go. Well, look what happened here. When I looked for this article, look, which one went first?
First, the year.
The one that I gave you in. I gave it to you. Dynamic Capabilities and Strategic Management by Thies, Pisang, and Schwen. How many times has it been cited? 8,093 results. Wow, that's a lot. It's very good. Look at the most of them have. I wanted to read this one, but it had to be paid for. This one by Nonaka. Nonaka is very important. He has a theory of organizational creation of knowledge. Nonaka and Takeuchi. It's a famous book in organization studies. So this is Nonaka, and if you want it, you have to pay for it. I think it costs $35 to $40. So I wanted to read that, but I didn't have money at the time, so I couldn't take it down. Look, this is the third one we're going to use. You see? Strategic Management Journal. What is it? It's Grant. Right? That has 4,900 citations. Right? And then the one by, that would be this one by Alabi. Exactly. Is it around here? It must be around here. It's highly cited. You see? This, in my opinion, should be something that you use for your students with us every day. This is just one database, the Web of Science. There's other ones. And I think you must explore them since the first day and learn how to use them because they're very, very useful. When you're writing, when you're researching on something, when you need to know something, you just get in here and you find approximately 80 to 85% of what you're looking for. The other 10, 15% has to be paid for. But there is a relationship with libraries of other universities, and through the library, maybe it would be possible to get those articles that here the databases are asking for a payment, and through other libraries of other universities, because of the agreements we have with them, we could get it for free. It would take a bit more time, but you can get it for free through the library. So that means that you can find your sources of literature at 85, 90% just using the electronic databases here at Xochimilco. It's a lot of money that's paid for from taxpayers' money. That's a lot of money, and it must be used and intensively used, in my opinion. Okay, so that's what I did. They told me you have to give some ideas about organizations in the pre-course for the master's program. It's on organizations and gives a proposal. So I said, since it's about management and organization, let's put in those two words. Let's see what happens. And look what happened when I put those two words in this database. I found these articles. And that's how I selected them. Right? But it changes. These three were the three most important when I did it last time. Well, let's go to the article. Yes?
A question. We can find only articles, or we can also find
Statistics? No, this is for articles basically, and conferences, conference papers.
Okay.
Books, reviews only. Basically, book reviews, conference papers, and scientific articles in indexed, I don't know how to say it, journals, in the international index of journals, basically. That's the only thing you'll find. Well, look, the idea is to read. You'll have to be patient, those who know English, because there's people that don't know English very well. I would say we would have to act right now as newborn readers, something like that. Newborn readers. What does that mean? Exactly. Newborn readers in English, but reading scientific literature. I think, and that's why I split, you received the article in two forms. One was a PDF archive for all the article, and the rest of the archives in PDF were the same article, but just cut up in pieces. Why cut up in pieces? Because I think when you're reading anything, when you're reading scientific literature, the first thing that you have to identify are the parts, are the basic parts of what you're going to read. Starting from the title, going through the abstract, the introduction, and ending with the references in the bibliography. Right? And that's what we'll do right now. This, I believe, is the first part. And of course, as you saw, right now that I looked up in the database in the Web of Science, I put the words in for management and organization, and I got this for a knowledge-based theory of the firm. Okay? So we have the abstract. What I asked you to do, I don't know if you did it. It's not obligatory, but it's nice. It's part of the participation and the cooperation during this course. That you should, for each of the parts I sent you, you should try to make a resume, abstract, synthesis of what you understood. Of course, the first thing you have to read in any article is the abstract, right? So let's read it. I would like to make it a bit larger. I'll read it, and then I'll ask any of you if you did something with that abstract. Because the first way, look, there's a lot of literature, and you're going to start reading and reading, and mainly for your final report, research report, you know, your thesis, you're going to have to be selecting and looking for things. And it's very important to be selective. So you get an article, you find articles, right? And what do you read first? The abstract. And what's the first question you have to ask yourself? Does it work for me? Or does it not work for me? Yes or no? Yes, it does work. I put it on this side. You go to the next article, you read the abstract. Does it work for me? Does it relate with my research? Does it give me an insight, something? No. Then it goes down this side. And that's going to be a process you're going to have to be doing every day when you select literature. Does it work for me? Does it not work for me? That's the first thing you have to decide. And how do you decide that? Well, you have to look for things, as we did right now in the Web of Science. And of course, what does the search motor of that thing do? Well, the words that you put, it looks for them, or you tell it to look. I put topic, so it looks for the topic first in the title, then it looks in the abstract, and then in the rest of the text. And if it finds those two words I put in, management and organization, it selects it, right? In the same way, we have to do the same thing. For example, for your final report, and research report for your, well, we call it commonly a thesis, but truly it's called the ICR. That's the end paper. What the UNAM calls thesis, we call in Spanish ICR. Idónea comunicación de resultados. That's the official name. That's the sixth trimester. The generation of the master course right now, program, they're about to finish. They're in the 5th trimester. They're going to pass to the 6th trimester. And in the 6th trimester, you only have a seminar. Research seminar for innovation, management, economics, and politics, right? So when you do this, you're going to be reading a lot and selecting things. So that's what we want to do right now. Let's read the abstract, and let's see what you understood. It's really interesting. The first interesting thing is that a lot of people read it. So that means that he's a source of knowledge for thousands and thousands of papers. Because thousands and thousands of papers are cited in this paper, right? And this paper is from what year? 1996, right? The boom. Well, here goes the abstract, and then we'll go by parts. I'll read some parts, and then I'll ask you. I'll read the abstract first. Let's read the abstract. There we go. I hope you can follow me. Given assumptions about the characteristics of knowledge and the knowledge requirements of production, the firm is conceptualized as an institution for integrating knowledge. As you can see in the first sentence, he is defining, he's giving a definition, a very short definition of what he conceives is the firm. Integrator of knowledge. Organization that integrates knowledge. The primary contribution of this paper is in exploring the coordination mechanisms through which firms integrate the specialist knowledge of their members. In contrast to earlier literature, knowledge is viewed as residing within the individual, and the primary role of the organization is knowledge application rather than knowledge creation. The resulting theory has implications for the basis of organizational capability, the principles of organization design, in particular the analysis of hierarchy and the distribution of decision-making authority, and the determinants of the horizontal and vertical boundaries of the firm. More generally, the knowledge-based approach sheds new light upon current organizational innovations and trends and has far-reaching implications for management practice. Did you all read the abstract? What do you think?
I still have an issue with the term firm. I'm still not sure if I'm understanding if it could apply for any kind of, I don't want to say organizations because I'm assuming that that's a different concept.
No, organization is a very important concept.
What I mean, is it firm the same as an organization or an institution, or could a school be a firm?
A firm?
Could a university
A firm is an organization.
Yeah.
So there's an.
But a firm could be also an institution.
Yeah.
Very important firms.
It depends
Well,
on
the idea of that, you don't have to read on that, Victoria, but firm means basically enterprise. A firm, it could be a small firm, a middle firm, a hyper big firm, but it's the same thing as firma, empresa. That's it. Of course, a firm is an organization, right? How do organization studies begin? Organizational studies began in the second half of the 19th century. The first ones start something called, or the pre times of organization studies in that late 19th century were the engineers of the firms, of those new firms that were growing and growing. Remember that most of the multinational companies that exist nowadays in the world, specifically European and American multinationals, most of them were born in the 19th century, between 1800 and 1900. For example, General Electric was born in 1867, something like that. So the engineers that were working for firms of different sizes were the first ones to ask themselves about the organizational problem. And the basic organizational problem that they saw was a human problem. And the basic human problem they saw was, how can we perfectly control work in the workplace by the worker? If he goes to the bathroom, if he loses time, how can I increase productivity? That was the first idea. You know, first they started making accounting. First you have to start with accountability of things. You have to measure your flows. You have to measure everything as an accountant. But after measuring, these engineers start asking themselves about organizational design. Precisely. So this human problem, you know, the main human problem of organization was, how can we make working processes more efficient? How can we raise productivity? So they start making studies and all these kinds of things. By 1924, in the last century, in Harvard, a famous circle was formed. It was called the Circle of Pareto. It was a circle formed by different intellectuals of the time, and their basic idea was to study organization as a social system. That's the hypothesis or the paradigm that moved them. Remember that Wilfrido Pareto, he's known a lot in economy by economists, basically by neoclassical economists, because of why? Because of a general equilibrium theory. The general equilibrium theory has to do with Pareto, yes?
And in this reason, the abstract, the theory of the firm take the knowledge as a property of the firm, and this application of this the knowledge. And today, don't think about where born this knowledge, and others writers about this. I remember Schumpeter, and they introduced the innovative agent.
Agency?
As a person that take a new idea for no only produce para no sé también para el producto y el proceso productivo, o sea, introduce una nueva idea, pero toman en consideración ahora estas nuevas corrientes a la gente, cosa que la teoría de la firma convencional no lo toma en cuenta, como por ejemplo ellos nomás se dedican al equilibrio general y pues obviamente no toman en cuenta a la gente innovador.
Well, neoclassical theory doesn't have a theory of technology for innovation. It doesn't have it, right? Well, a bit with the question by Victoria. So organizational studies started in firms, in private firms, right? But as they were expanding, they started studying everything. Why? Everything is organized. Everything is organized. Now, take into account the following. Not because it is organized does it mean that it is perfect. I think there's like a confusion sometimes with people when they talk. They say, but it's organized. Oh yeah, that's real nice, okay. Let's organize society. For example, what happens with Mexican society that it cannot organize itself against the political parties? Because really, truly, the control of this country is in the hands of the political parties. Right? And they don't necessarily represent truly and really the interests of most of the Mexicans, as I know.
As Mark said.
Exactly. You know? So organizational studies started to expand. So we started studying hospitals, schools, the military, everything. Because everything has to be organized. What is an organization? What is a minimum definition of organization? It's a relationship, at least between two persons, under certain rules, and with a specific and common objective. It's a relationship, at least between two persons. It's a social relationship that follows certain rules or norms or laws, and they have a common objective. They're organized. So organization, as we saw in this lecture, in this reading, has to do with cooperation and has to do with collaboration. Right? Now, there's formal organizations, there's informal organizations. There is permanent organization, and there's temporal organization. For example, if you read The Functions of the Executive by Chester Barnard, which is it's the first book written, at least in English, on organizational theory. The Functions of the Executive. And it's a book about organizational theory, wrote by Chester Barnard. 1939, times in which Herbert Simon was studying, finishing his doctoral thesis. Herbert Simon is very important, besides that he's a Nobel Prize winner, economic prize winner. He's much, maybe the administrators, no sé, Paola, Daniela, time for administration. Do you read Herbert Simon?
Yes.
¿El comportamiento administrativo, acaso? Yes. It's a Bible, isn't it? It's like a Bible. You read it in 4th, 5th trimester, something like that. 4th, yes. It's very important. Why? Because Simon was an economist, but he put in a theory, it's more than a theory as such. It's what do you call it? Oh, I forgot right now. He talks about bounded rationality. Rationality, economic rationality in neoclassical theory is a global rationality, which means that the economic agents have all the information they need, so all the decisions they take are optimal. Because in economic neoclassical theory, competition can be perfect, you have perfect information, complete information, so you can take the best decisions. So here comes Mr. Simon, he says, look, economists, there's like an idea of the economic man, and he's like perfect, he's perfectly rational, he takes only optimal decisions and all these kinds of stuff. But the truth is that that doesn't exist. Knowledge is not complete, knowledge is not perfect, we have limited knowledge. And within that limited knowledge, we take decisions. That is why he calls it bounded rationality. Bounded means limited. Racionalidad limitada versus racionalidad global. And that's very important, right? In terms of the theory. And then comes new theories that have to do with administration. But the thing is, in the idea of this question by Victoria, that organizational studies started studying the firm, but ended up studying any organization and institutions. Because you cannot separate organizational studies from institutional studies. Because how are organizations born? They have to be born under certain rules. What is an institution? An institution are the rules. Right? What is an institution? It's a rule. It's a norm. It's a law. You should not kill. You should not rob. You should not fake. All those things that we should not do are put there in the law so we behave ourselves. So institutions have to do with the way human beings interact in society. They interact through rules. So the organizations, for example, economic organizations, which are the center, the focus of our studies here in this master program, have to follow rules. You have to go with an attorney, right? You have to form your firm or your enterprise or your organization. You have to say what you're going to do. And there's certain norms and rules that you have to follow just to make a new firm, to create a new firm, right? And then if you sell medicines, you have to go for permission to sell your medicines to the government agency that authorizes the use of certain medicines. So the relationship between organizations, right? We have organizations,
Rules.
and we have institutions. And the institutions are rules, right? And organizations are relationships that take these rules into account, but that have their own objective, right? But within these rules. So there could be illegal organizations, for example, organized crime. Organized crime is a great example. It's organized. It's organized crime, but it's illegal. But it exists. Or informal economy. It's informal and maybe to a certain point illegal if you take into account the payment of taxes, right? But it exists. And the true thing is that institutions are always formal and informal. They live together. There's informal rules and there's formal rules, right? Formal rules are laws, norms, and all those kinds of things. Informal rules have to do with culture, have to do with people, right? And in the same way, the organization has a technical organization inside, and it has a social organization inside. And an organization has informal organization and formal organization. An organization, what? All the organization. Technical organizations means, for example, Bimbo, which makes bread. It has to do with all the way they organize their production and their commercialization part. The technical parts of that, right? The social organization means that it's a cooperative system, a collaboration system. An organization, by definition, is a cooperative system. Chester Barnard, in his book on the function of executive, says, what is authority? Authority is, in his idea, leadership. And in his idea, leadership means convince the rest to organize, to collaborate, and to cooperate, because we have a greater result from cooperating than not cooperating. So in the idea of Chester Barnard, the idea of being a leader in an organization is to convince the others to cooperate. Not to say you have to work because you are my employee and there is a contract. Yes, that exists. That's formal organization. Right? But in informal organization, that's a formal organization. In informal organization, there's things that won't happen in the firm if you don't talk to people in a certain way. With the secretaries, with the technicians, with the directives, with whoever. You have to be more human. You have to be more informal. Or else things don't get done. You see? So that's like a very, very rapid way through organizational studies. So when you go to organizational studies, you can't skip institutions. Right? And how do organizations can be born top down, or organizations can be born down up. Right? Top down means, for example, when government creates a new organization for giving milk to the poorest people of the country, for example, right? But from down up, think about, for example, in government, la Comisión de Búsqueda de Desaparecidos. That was a proposal from the social organizations. It went from down up, and government had to accept that. And it's working so-so because you know how we are. But that's an example of a down up, an organization, an institution that was born from the society towards the government. And other ones go from the government to society. It's a combination, right? Sometimes certain informal rules can become formal, right? And certain formal rules can make that informal rules be born. So they're combined. Any institution has a formal and an informal side. Just the law. Just the law. Of course, the law has a rule. It says this, and that. But finally, when you go to a court in front of a judge, the judge will interpret that what the law says. So there's always the formal thing is limited. You see, there's more than the formal thing. Well, let's go back to this. Could anybody give me a comment of this first part? What things are important? What did you find? You want to read? We could just look for definitions. Look, the idea of this is just to make an exercise of reading and understanding, taking notes, using the board, maybe making some mental maps on concepts to understand them better, like to develop techniques for reading and reading even faster. We could start that way. Who could start the first part of this reading? Anyone? You'll have to be doing this when you're in here. And you're going to be presenting. Most of the professors will organize you in groups, 2, 3, 4 people, students, and each group will have to present to the rest of the class readings. That will be a very important dynamic all first year. So let's start anyway. Please, Monica.
Okay, theories of the firm are conceptualizations and models of business enterprises, which explains, predict their structure and behaviors. Although economics is the theory of the firm, in its simple form.
Where are you reading so we can follow you?
theories of the firm.
There's
First
a
paragraph.
Okay. Let's go up a bit. Look, it doesn't matter if we make it through all the articles. I think the important thing here is to concentrate and try to develop a technique of how to read. How to extract the substantial, the important part of what you're reading. That's the idea. Okay. Again, please, Monica, you're right here?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I can use this here.
Articles of organizations.
Can I use this? This is, sorry, Monica.
No, you can use it because look at that.
Look, the idea of this thing is it's an intelligent.
Yeah, it was with
board.
the school board and the school board, and then you use a.
I used to use that at the
pen,
beginning.
pencil.
It was a time of that magnificent, that great man. Oh,
It is good.
he was a king of presidents, Mr. Vicente Fox. They ripped off. Look, the Mexican administration, the government invested. I don't know. They bought these things for
And it's
schools,
expensive.
for elementary schools, for secondary schools. They bought I don't know, maybe 100,000 pieces of these things for all Mexico. 89%, 90% of all these things were ripped off, were robbed.
But
Here
many,
in the what? Think, Monica.
but many people, I think that they are afraid to use these tools, and then they don't use, and they continue with the board.
Yes, but
And
the idea of this tool, what is it?
Is
That you could go writing, you have to use a special marker, and you go writing on this thing, and after you finish writing on your screen, whatever you want, you just save it.
and then you have something
And it
else.
becomes a digital archive.
Yeah.
That's the idea of these boards. It's connected to a computer, so it goes into, so when you give a class or you give a presentation, all the notes you take on this thing can go digital. But we're using it, it's crazy, right? Because we're going to just use it to see. And we're going to have to use this on this side, which is the oldest way. Well, it's the oldest, it's the idea of creative destruction, right? Before that, my hands would all be white. White, full of chalkboard,
Yes.
right? La pizza, right? El gis, that was it was another kind of surface, right? Painted surface,
Green.
right? Green surface, exactly. And you would use the chalkboard, that was and then they saw the technology and time changes now, right? So we went to a chemical solution. This is a chemical solution. Because this is fruit of the chemical industry. This thing here, as well as this thing, because this is plastic, right? The thing is that the same way you get dirty, look, you just use these things a little bit, and when you finish class, your hands are all dirty, full, instead of chalk, they're full of chemicals. But that's the idea of creative destruction by Schumpeter, which is a very important concept. You destroy certain things. For example, the traditional chalkboard in green is being manufactured in Mexico, but not so much. Because now, this is being sold much more. Right? I don't know if it's the correct thing, that's the way it's going. So, we want the idea of reading here. Please, Monica.
Okay.
We're on this paragraph, right?
Theories of the firm are conceptualizations and models of business enterprises which explain and predict their structure and behaviors, although economists use the term theory of
Wait, let's go by saying, look, let's see what he's saying. Hi. Nervous about this.
I believe the market don't.
Should it be used on that one? I don't know. I would have to ask.
But
That's it.
but you can clean it with
Let's see.
Lysol. Yeah.
Oh, you can't clean it. Look.
If you-
That doesn't sound very good.
Yeah.
That's problematic.
Yes.
Look, because I do this in class, and I like this. Because using this, I project with my projector in bachelor degree, and I use this one. So my projection goes on this side, and I can write on this side, and at the same time, when I have a graphic or I have text or something I want to underline to the students. I can underline right here, I can make things, and I just change it, it's perfect. And here I think I just blew it. What? Now we have to get some Lysol, or what is it? That's problematic, that's problematic. So, well,
Behaviors, we're stopping behaviors.
we're just starting. Don't get uneasy. Life is long. I hope.
There.
There we go. There we go. So we're on this first sentence. Look what he's saying. Theories of the firm are conceptualizations and models of business enterprises. For example, for you, because you were asking, look, firm is a business enterprise which explain and predict. This is the idea of neoclassical theory. When you read neoclassical theory, what do they say? Economic models are made for analyzing and predicting. Right? Their structure and behavior. So, look, in the first sentence he says, okay, we're studying theories of the firms, and theories of the firms explain and predict structure and behavior of the firm. That's the idea of that first sentence. Those are the four clue words. The next sentence, look, although economists use the term theory of the firm, now he's going to say something about the theory of the firm. In its singular form, there is no single multi-purpose theory of the firm. What is he saying? What we say for all the social sciences. There is not one theory of economics. There is many theories of economics.
Multiple approaches.
It's multiple approaches, exactly. So that's the first thing. Because some people defend it. No, there's only one theory of the firm. Most of those guys that are very neoclassical. And if you don't come into our principles of neoclassical theory, you're not making anything about the theory of the firm. You're out of the field. Every theory of the firm is an abstraction of the real-world business enterprise. Of course, theory is abstraction. That's a commonplace, which is designed to address a particular set of its characteristics and behavior. That's my look. I go on. As a result, let's see how he finishes this paragraph. Look how they construct it in English. In English, when you write articles, the English writing is done in this way. The first sentence is opening a topic. The last sentence is giving a conclusion or a result, or is closing the idea of that paragraph. And in between, like a sandwich, we have specific elements or characteristics. It's always the sandwich way of doing things. The first sentence, as I said, introduce. And yes, he's introducing. He's saying that theory of the firm are concepts, right, and models, right, of the structure and behavior of business enterprises. So it's like a big introduction. And then he starts giving certain precisions. For example, well, I'm talking about theories of the firm because there is not one theory of the firm. So this second sentence is explaining better why he used that first word in plural. You see? And then the second sentence is the first sentence. Here comes the second sentence. Here comes the third sentence. Every theory of the firm, look, he's explaining. He's opening the explanation of theory of the firm. The first sentence was introductory, and the second and the third opened the explanation of the theory of the firm. Every theory of the firm is an abstraction of the real-world business enterprise, which is designed to address a particular set of its characteristics and behaviors. And he takes that from a classic. As a result, his ending sentence, as a result, there are many theories of the firm which both compete in offering rival explanations of the same phenomenon and complement one another in explaining different phenomena. Nice paragraph. It's nicely organized. You see, in 4 sentences. The entrance, the content, explaining more things, and the ending. So we were reading. Then, so you see, I believe that's how you read things, right? What did I come to with this? Let me see what I did. This guy was right here. I did something with this. There we go. I took some notes, like in mental maps, right? What do I see in this first part? Well, the abstract. From the abstract, I found that the most important thing for me was the firm integrates knowledge by coordinating integration of specialist knowledge. See, that's what I think is the most important part of the abstract. That the function, that the idea of the firms that we're talking about is that the idea of the firm is an alternative to the market. And what does this alternative consist of? The firm is an organization that integrates specialized knowledge. And what is the idea of integrating? So you have specialized knowledge, right? And that's what you integrate as an organization, right? It's made of individuals. This is the organization. And what is the idea? It comes out to be to integrate finally in a product or in service. You integrate specialized knowledge. Where is specialized knowledge? Inside the persons. The members of the organization, the workers, right? The employees. It's their tacit knowledge. That will be very important to differentiate between tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. He makes a differentiation.
Yeah.
And that's very important. What is tacit knowledge? What people know. Well, he even starts with the definition of knowledge, right? What is knowledge? Knowledge is what we know. It's like very like a tautology, but it's not, right? So the idea he has, the central idea that this author has about the firm as an organization, is that it's an organization of what? Of specialized knowledge. That will be transferred and integrated finally in a product or a service that will go to the market to be sold.
But,
That's what this is all about. Yes?
well, what I understand about the paper is what it's that knowledge, you can model the knowledge and it can be constructive, and then, for example, I don't know the name in English, it is well as, por ejemplo, la actuaria lo debe saber, filtraciones, filtrations, I don't know if you translate that.
¿Filtraciones de agua
No,
o de información?
filtrations about, of filtrations about models, economics,
Oh.
and you can model the knowledge, and you can count the knowledge, no? So I understand that was the importance of the paper.
You can count the knowledge.
As sigmas algebraicas como filtraciones algebraicas.
I don't understand that part very much. I don't know if Diana could help us out. But I do understand that the first idea is that he wants to explain this. That this is his definition of organization, the firm. An organization, what is the firm? Well, market-oriented firm. It's an organization that integrates specialized knowledge. And this specialized knowledge is then integrated in the final product or service that is sold in the market. Okay, but we'll take that on the... Anyone else? Economic theories of the firms are concerned primarily with predicting and the behavior of the firms in external markets. That's how he starts this paragraph. How does he end it? Let's go back to the ending. Disposition of the notion of the firm as a single decision taker. Look at I hit it with the arrows. It goes down. I shouldn't say those words, but I was about to say something not very nice. Let's go. How does he finish this? Disposition of the values as a single decision taker as a complex relationship encompassing multiple individuals. Organization theory analyzes the internal structure of the firm and the relationships between its constituent units and departments. For example, he's giving more definitions, I think. In this case, he's opening the idea of what the organization is. Right? Then, interest by social scientists in the firm is an institution. Look what he says. Interest by social scientists in the firm as an institution. And I said a while ago, it's an organization. It could be, well, the idea of firm, the general, the abstract idea of firm, of enterprise, is an institution. Why? Because this is capitalism. And what is the essence of capitalism? Capital. Capital. And capital has to reproduce itself. And how does capital reproduce itself? Going to the market, selling something, and obtaining a profit from that what is sold. And that profit is accumulated, constantly accumulated. So capital starts to grow. Well, the firm is the organization in charge of doing that capital accumulation. But at the same time, it's an institution. Why? Because it is the essence of the rule of capitalism. You have to make profit. If you don't make profit, you are not a firm. You go bankrupt. Right? Yes?
I think the issue I have in terms of the concept or the word firm versus institution is because most of the government institutions are called like that.
Yes.
So how do you, and I just remember like 15 minutes ago you were mentioning that institutions are basically the laws and the norms and so many others, but now I think I get a bit lost because now that we keep going and moving forward in terms of the institution, organization, firm, from a capitalist perspective, so then how do you position the political or the government institutions in this whole system, and why are then they called like that?
There are institutions
but the
as
purpose
well.
is not to reproduce capital or making profits.
Well, but they're very important. You can't do, that's another idea in economics, Victoria, very important. The idea of the neoclassical theory of the firm, the neoclassical theory of economics, is that the market can work by itself. It's autonomous. It doesn't need the intervention of the state. But the truth is, the very truth is, that if you let markets to go completely autonomous from state intervention, what will you have? You will have a worse distribution of wealth than we have now. What does that mean? That the market, what we call the market, right? In neoclassical theory, there should not be any government intervention, right? But in institutional economics, intervention is the main hypothesis. Through institutions, you intervene in the market to obtain a certain economical change. And you have to do that. You have to put rules. If you let capital put its own, very, very own rules, things go crazy. I guess we would have disappeared already. Capitalism wouldn't have lasted so many years. Look at the Chinese. The Chinese are real realistic and pragmatic. I think they're a bit crazy because they just re-elected their president, and he will be able to be re-elected from here on, as long as he lives and has the power. But what China has told us is that they're a very great capitalist competitor in terms of firms, basically in terms of firms. And how have they done this? With a very high intervention from the government. A very high intervention from the government. Government still owns many companies in China, but others are private companies, right? Korea as well. Korea has advanced in 30 years because there was a very strong interventions from public institutions to give the market certain minimum rules, to acquire for society certain income distribution. Because what is basic for a market? The income distribution. If you don't have a correct income distribution, you don't have a market, or you have a very small market. That's the problem in Mexico. Mexico has not been able to consolidate its markets. It's an internal market. We don't really have an internal market linked to internal production. We are linked to the American market, to the US market. Our relationship is 80% with the United States, right? So income distribution in Mexico explains why the economy can't grow anymore. There is not enough money in the major part of the population to go spending at the market. There's not enough income distribution. So that you have to take care of that when you're growing as a country, when you're organizing things, right? When you're institutionalizing things. For example, talking about this institution organization confusion, Victoria. This place here is La Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana. It is an educational organization, but it is also called by the government. How does the government call these organizations? Instituciones de Educación Superior. But they're organizations. They're an institution as well, because education is an institution. Why is education an institution? Because human beings learn. Learning. The educational process is an institution. What does the Mexican law say? School is obligatory from 4 years old to 18 years old, from second year of preschool, primary or elementary schooling, secondary schooling, the pre-bachelor schooling. All that is obligatory. It's a rule, it's a law. Another thing is what happens in reality. That not all Mexicans can go to school, not all Mexicans can learn as we wish for them to learn, because they don't eat every day. You have to eat well, you have to sleep, you have to have conditions, human conditions to go on. But education is an institution. But this is an organization as well as an institution. I hope I have made myself clear, or I hope you are more confused, so you will have an incentive to look for in the literature and to clarify those ideas, right? Well, he continues to give us certain, as you can see, he starts to put forward a series of concepts, for example, hierarchies. That will be very important, hierarchies. You know, this organization, this is a way of painting it, but truly, firms are hierarchies. Top management, sub-management, supervisors, right? Employees, workers, others. You know, it has layers. Hierarchy. That's how you organize. And decisions go from here down. For example, is the university a hierarchy? Yes, it is also a hierarchy. And almost any organization is a hierarchy. Why? Because the bureaucratic model has been used by human beings for 2 centuries at least, right? But there's a difference. This is a firm, for example, and this is a university.
It can be vertical or horizontal.
No, the university can also be very vertical. This is a university organization. And it also has its layers. Here we have the rector general. Here we have the CEO, right? Here we have the colegio académico. Here we have the administration council, right? We have all those layers, right? So rector general comes with Manuel Soria. He's right here, the professor. Manuel Soria, tomorrow I want to study a very nice research about environmental economics and the participation of the university. I'm waiting for that paper for tomorrow. 2 months later comes Manuel Soria with the rector general. Here's your paper, rector general. 2 months later. But if Manuel Soria works in this company, and the CEO calls him and tells him, tomorrow, I want a paper on environmental economics on my desk. And what will happen to Manuel Soria if that document is not the next day on the desk of the CEO? Manuel Soria will lose his job. Here. Will Manuel Suarez lose his job here? No.
Because of the syndicate, would it be?
No, because this is a loosely coupled system. And this is a closely coupled system. Because this is a private firm. And the decision chain, right? Cadena de mando. Here's like taking a horse, right? Because the horse you pull, and the horse stops or turns immediately, right? You direct it. And here we have a loosely coupled system. Yes, I'm interested, I will do it, but I'll take my time. So universities as organizations are defined as loosely coupled systems. Yes, they are systems, yes, they work, but they have another logic, they have another timing, right? Compared to private organizations, firms that have a very closely coupled system. If you don't obey, you're out. Here, yes, you obey, but you cooperate, but you take your time. You see? So these are the things that you study in organization. And it's always interesting. Well, anyone else on this first part? No. Why not? Look, he makes a real important question. Why firms? That's the central question at the start. Theories of the firm, McLeod, marginal behavior, managerial, etc. Neoclassical, external markets, organizational, internal aspects. That's what I was reading right now. And then comes the idea. Why firms? Look, if you're going to do research here, you're going to have to learn to put the question forward and then a possible answer. Why? Because that's the essence of your final paper. You have to make yourself a very nice question. And then you have to answer that question. That's basically how scientists work. You have to start with a question. So he starts with a question. Why firms? ¿Por qué las empresas? Why? And you would say, other people would say, why ask that? Why not? And what does he say? He talks about transaction costs. He talks about firm behavior. He talks about evolutionary economics. He talks about strategic management. And then in strategic management, he talks about two views. The resource-based view and the knowledge-based view. You see? So if you understand that, you say, okay, it's an article on strategic management. Particularly, it's about the management of knowledge. And his idea is that the firm is basically knowledge-based. Right? Of course, there is the idea of the resource-based firm. I don't think he gives a very good definition of resource-based firm, but he starts making a difference between resource-based firms, firma basada en recursos, and knowledge-based firm, firma basada en conocimiento. Right? So I think I guess that's important. It's like right here, right now. I go to the next page, right? And then, well, he's in this paragraph, this first paragraph, look, in the last part of this page, the first part of the next paragraph, although strategic management has drawn its theories of the firm from both economics and organization theory. Look, this is the main thing you have to do when you do your final, your thesis or your ICR. The first thing you have to do is that you have to look for the relevant literature. Once you make yourself a question, why does certain organization innovate in such a way? I don't know, X organization. You have to look for the relevant knowledge. For example, as you can see, one of the things he's doing in his introduction is his field, his literature field, his knowledge field, to look for that relevant knowledge is the strategic information management field, right? In social sciences, and I guess in basic sciences as well, you have to look for knowledge through fields. It's organized in fields. So you have to identify the field of knowledge which helps you explain better that phenomenon or that whatever you're researching, you're investigating on, right? So that's what he's doing in his introduction. He's taking it easy, and here, look, here he starts. The result has been new contributions to the theory of the firm. The original theory of the firm was neoclassical, but the true thing is that neoclassical theory doesn't really have a theory of the firm. They just say firm, but they never define the firm. It's crazy. That's why neoclassical theory is crazy. They never mention money. They don't have a concept of money. They don't have a concept of savings. They don't have a concept. They talk about technology, but it's important.
So why is it the ruling economy
That's a nice
obsession
question
right
for you.
now?
It's a beautiful question. Because that's ideological, right? Look, what is my idea of markets? Markets, free markets. Free market doesn't exist. It has never existed. And it doesn't exist right now. There is nothing as free market. Nothing is free market. But what is a discourse? The government discourse, the businessman's discourse. Oh, free markets, free trade, and all this stuff, and all this that. Of course not. Markets are controlled by multinational corporations and financial capital. Market is controlled. It's not a free market. It is always controlled by multinational corporations and by financial capital corporations. Right? But the idea is to convince people. So I think it's the precise definition of ideology. Ideology, according to the German philosophers and Marx and even Marx and Engels, is inverted vision of reality. Right? You see reality and you invert it. The reality is that markets are controlled by multinational firms and financial capital, more than even by the governments. But the discourse and the idea that they put forward in the newspapers, in the television, and everywhere, is that any individual can be a great businessman in the United States or in Europe. That if the government doesn't intervene in markets and lets markets to be free, things will go great, right? But I don't think it's true. I don't think that free markets exist. They have never existed. There has never been competition as it is defined in Adam Smith and all these neoclassical authors. Pure competition, that doesn't exist. The only type of competition that exists is from oligopoly to monopoly, and that's it. 95 or 98% of all the merchandise, of all the goods, of all the services that we use every day, they come from pequeña, micro pequeña, and mediana industry? No way. They come from oligopolies or monopolies. They control the market. They control the technology, you see. So in my idea, free market and competition as it is defined in neoclassical theory is just a rhetoric, ideological rhetoric to maintain the establishment we have. And to not see the true thing that we have to see. We have to deal with pharmaceutical companies. It's nice that they innovate, but at the same time, we have the problem in the US of all these medicines they call, in Spanish they call it opiáceos. There's a crisis in the United States. 150,000 people are dying every year because of these types of medicines. And the problem of these medicines is that the propaganda, the publicity, the marketing of these medicines is, oh, you feel this way, you feel that way, just buy one of our little tablets and take the tablet and you'll be fine. You see? So, what's happening there, you have a very powerful multinational company that is making these kinds of medicines that, of course, they help human beings. Yes, they help human beings if that human being is seen as a psychiatrist.
Yes.
And he has a control. Okay, no way, no problem. But if the person can buy those things in any way in the market, the thing is crazy. Because you have a public crisis of health there. A public health crisis. Right? And it's not so easy to go against that company, because that company has politicians on the side, that company has a lot of money, that company has lawyers, you know. So the campaign is going real strong in the US right now, and they're trying to make a campaign. They're organizing, you know. The US has, that's crazy about the US, because Trump got to be president, but the US is known to be the society in the world with the most non-government organizations.
The USA?
The USA, of course. The USA, they have millions of NGOs, ONGs. No, it's the society as a country that has more NGOs. And that's interesting, but I asked myself, how did Trump win? If civil society in the US is organized. Yes, but of course, firearms are organized, right? How are firearms organized in the United States? The Second Amendment, the Constitution of the United States, the law, the institution. What does it say? Any American over 18 years old can buy a gun. Okay, so you organize yourself, and you buy 3, 4, 50, and you have all kinds of firearms, and you're 15 years old. Right? So you see the relationship between institution and organization. And the big fight in the US is, how will we change this amendment, or at least put in some restrictions? Right? They have to do something about it. They're having a crisis, and that won't go down. I think those assassinations will go up. As long as they have that amendment, that constitution, that institution, that law, that norm, unless they change it, things will just go in crescendo. Because the law permits it. It's a behavior that's permitted. That's the idea of institutions, right? Well, this author, the resource-based view of the firm is less a theory of firm structure and behavior as an attempt to explain and predict why some firms are able to establish positions of sustainable competitive advantage. Here comes another thing that's important, this concept, competitive advantage. Besides the idea, I think in this article, besides the idea of the firm as an organization that integrates specialized knowledge, that eventually is integrated in a final product or service to be sold in the market and obtain a profit, this concept is fundamental. Because what does knowledge give you? Integrating knowledge. That's the idea, right? There's an advantage when you know things or you develop things through knowledge that other firms and other organizations do not know. So that's the idea of a competitive advantage, right? The other idea in economics is a comparative advantage. The idea that comes from economics. What is a comparative advantage? It has to do just with the idea, for example, for example, does Mexico have a competitive advantage or a comparative advantage against the US and Canada in NAFTA? I'm asking.
None of them.
What?
I would say none of them.
None of them.
It doesn't have any kind of advantage in the NAFTA.
Of course it has advantages. Don't be so pessimistic. We have advantages. Does Mexico have a comparative or a competitive advantage? The Mexican firms forward or in front of American firms, North American firms? Salvador.
Then,
What do you think?
Ventajas competitivas.
Do you think that ventajas competitivas o comparativas? What is comparativas?
¿en términos de salario o...?
Yes, comparative advantage. The basic one is resource allocation, dotación de recursos, forests, water,
Human resources too?
and then of course population.
Yes.
What was the first advantage of the Chinese? A comparative advantage. The number of its population and the conditions in which they lived, right? Or things have changed, but I remember when I went to Japan, I used to work in the patent office here in Mexico.
Where?
One of the reasons because I am a professor here in Xochimilco is because I worked before when I finished my bachelor's degree from Iztapalapa. I went to the government, to the former Secretaría de Comercio y Industrial, which today is the Secretary of Economy, the Ministry of Economy. And the patent office, which was called at that time Dirección General de Invenciones y Marcas. It was a part of the ministry. Today, the Instituto Mexicano de la Propiedad Industrial is independent from the economic ministry. It's a decentralized organism, as they call it here in Mexico. It's that organization. So I worked in the office for about 4 years, right? And then I got fed up. I started my master's degree. I went to study a master's degree at UNAM, at Facultad de Ciencias Políticas y Sociales. I studied a master's degree in communication sciences. I went from economics to communication sciences. And then I did my PhD, my doctorate studies at Iztapalapa again, where I studied economics. There I studied a doctorate in organizational studies. Precisely, then I went to organizational studies. What I wanted to say about what did I say before that? I said about I worked in the patent office, and why am I here? Because of patents. Because one day I said, I was working in the government, I said, this is it. I'm fed up with this place. I already finished my master's, my thesis, I finished because in government in Mexico, I don't know how it is in Peru or in other places, but in Mexico you have like times in which you do nothing, you just sit there and do nothing. And there are other times where they want you to work all night, you see. So I managed to study, I could read and all that stuff, but I got fed up with that, and I presented, what is it? Mi renuncia. And then I started looking for a new job, and then I looked into the here at the university. My father worked at the University of Iztapalapa, so I had that former thing with me. And I found a contest, well, un concurso. That's how you go into the university. And it was beautiful, because the basic requirement was said, it said, licenciado en economía, terminado. Especialización en patentes. That was coming from the patent office. But that contest had been manufactured inside the university. That's how it counts, because inside the university you have the department and the research area and all the people get together, and they all together, they say which will be the requirements for that professor, for that new professor. And so they wanted a young student that was about to finish economics, that had participated in a research program on patents. So he knew about patents, but he had not finished his degree. He still had to finish the degree. So I just went in perfectly, right? And that's how I started working here in Xochimilco, and that was, what is it, 89? And we're about to go to 19. So I'm about to be here for 30 years. Time goes by real fast. So my entrance here has to do with patents, and that's what I do basically in the postgraduate program and in my research area. I'm specialized in patents, precisely in industrial property. Right now I have a project about university patents in Mexico, production, management, and diffusion of patents by the 5 main universities of Mexico City. That would be UNAM, UAM, IPN, CIDESTAF, and Tecnológico de Monterrey. Those are the 5 universities I'm studying right now. And well, going back to these ideas, I was talking about I talked about resource review of the firm and this idea of comparative and competitive advantages, because the idea of this reading is that we're working for a competitive advantage, and that competitive advantage is based on knowledge. And we cannot continue, as in Mexico, to be based on comparative advantages. The criticism in the negotiations right now on NAFTA from Canada and the United States to Mexico is precisely that comparative advantage. Mexico, you have such low salaries, the level of your salaries is so low that we cannot compete with you. And that's not fair. If you want to negotiate with us, we need you to elevate your salaries. So we have like a straighter terrain in which we're more equal, right? So this comparative advantage has Mexico in the fight, because Mr. Trump said, I want investments to come back to the United States. So what did Mr. Trump do? He changed an institution. This is institutional economics. You change an institution, and then you wait for the result in terms of economic change. And what institution did he change? Taxes. Taxes are institutions, of course. It's they are imposed. They don't ask you, I think you should pay taxes. No, you have to pay taxes. It's an obligatory institution. So he changed the taxation, and he reduced taxation for investments and all kinds of things. And the idea that with less taxes to pay in the United States, investments of multinational corporations in the United States would come back to the US. But that's not going to happen so easily. For example, in automobile production, yes, they have announced that Ford and I think certain Ram production by Dodge and all these kinds of things are going back to the United States. Yes, but those are luxury automobiles. Today, all those automobiles that are bought by the consumers, middle class consumers, basically, that in Mexico cost around. In Mexico, the cheapest car now, new car, is around 200,000 pesos.
Yes.
They're 180, 185, 200,000 pesos. Well, that car, any car of that category, cannot be manufactured in the United States. Why? Because of the costs. Right? They're too high for that price, 200,000. Of course, if you take back to the United States the production of a van or a pickup or a car that costs 400,000, 500,000, or 600,000 pesos, because the Suburban and all these kinds of cars, a Chevrolet Suburban costs 1 million pesos. 1 million. Okay, those you can't produce in the United States because the price is so high.
But you can afford it.
Although the cost is higher, you can afford it. But all the medium class, all the subcompacts, all the compact cars, they have to be produced in Mexico, in Brazil, in India, and China. And that's it. Trump may say whatever he wants to say, but those cars will not be produced again in the United States unless they are electrical cars. That's another tragic story.
And it also raises the price if it's electrical? Would it work? Because
It depends on the policy. For example, right now the policy in China is to produce electrical cars, and they're crazy on electrical cars. They calculate that this year or next year, they will be able to produce 1 million cars, electrical cars only. And the US is fighting that all the companies now have an electrical car. But the problem with electrical cars is the infrastructure. The car may be very nice these days and all these kinds of things. But what happens if you go to Chiapas, your nice, beautiful, recently bought car, right? Your Tesla, you arrive, the electricity finishes, and charging those cars, it's not just connecting it to your house. You have to do adaptations to your house, to your electrical house infrastructure. Because it's different. It's not the same thing to charge your cell phone than to charge your car. Besides the time, there's a technological limitation still there.
Yes.
Very strong. That's why maybe hybrids may go first than electricals. I was reading an article on Volkswagen that they calculate that by 2025, that means 7 years so from now, in 7, 8 years maybe, 40% of our cars will be fully electric. Yes, I don't doubt that. What I doubt is that if societies, if cities, if nations have the infrastructure to feed electricity to those cars.
No.
In gasoline, just go to this pump station, you pump gas, it won't take more than 10, 15 minutes. How much time do you have to charge electrically your car?
More than 2 hours.
At least. Of course it will be changing, right? But technologically that is not resolved. It changed the hybrids have a better resolution right now because there are a combination. Part of the idea is that you use gasoline to start the car, and once you're over 60 kilometers per hour, then an electrical motor starts. Maybe the best idea of how to use a hybrid right now is Formula One. I don't know if you know, but all the Formula One cars from 5 years ago are hybrids. They were just gasoline cars 5 years ago, and they changed the rule, this institution. The federation, the International Automobile Federation said, next year, no gasoline, 100% gasoline cars. All cars must be hybrid. And what do they do in Formula One? You have a gasoline motor, it has a turbo on it. So all exhaust that comes through the turbo is recharged and converted into electricity, and it goes to an electrical motor, right? And besides, every time the car brakes, the pilot brakes with the car, all the energy that comes from the brakes is also recuperated and is put into the electrical motor. And there's a technological coordination between the gasoline motor and the electrical motor, and that's how they work. So that would be much easier for the societies to assimilate, because you keep on using gasoline, but you use less. Right? So maybe that's going to be the transition. I don't know. We have 3 options right now. Gasoline car, hybrid car, and electrical car. Right? They also have been studying a lot on batteries, on hydrogen batteries, for example, using water only, but they haven't resolved that technology yet accordingly. But that's another, they've worked at that for about 30 years, using hydrogen, right? But it's not so, the other problem with electrical cars is that the battery doesn't have enough autonomy. They're around 350 kilometers, maybe 400 kilometers. If it's a very expensive car, they might give you 600 kilometers, but what will happen if you go so far and you don't have a place to charge that car, right? So that's an interesting technology. Cars, technology are changing in terms of autonomy. Of course, we're learning. I believe that an Uber killed a person the other day. One of these autonomous Uber cars somewhere in the United States, it went over a lady. It run over a lady, right? Because those cars are not perfect, but we're already in this idea of artificial intelligence, right? And it's coming into our world. Well, that, talking about resource-based comparative advantages, like Mexico, right? Biodiversity is a comparative advantage. Low salaries is a comparative advantage.
Taxes.
But not enough trained human resources. That is a competitive disadvantage. Right? Because except for maybe the automobile industry, Mexican automobile industry has very good workers. Very fine and prepared technicians and workers. Of course they do. Right? But we haven't been able to build a car. And that's what we're here for. Imagine, Mexico is the 7th world producer of cars in the world. They have very fine human resources.
What
Right?
are the first 6?
What?
Which are the first 6 countries?
Well, it would be, well, the United States, China, United States, Brazil, India.
Most of the powers, like the ruling powers in the world?
Yes, but the United States doesn't produce, it depends how you account for those cars. Because I don't know how the accountability is, because remember that we have 2 accountabilities. In Mexico, we account for Producto Interno Bruto, which means that all the things that are produced here, independently if it is a foreign firm or a national firm, is accountable for. In the United States, Great Britain, and all those developed countries, their accountability reaches the production in other countries. That's Producto Nacional Bruto. And ours is Producto Interno Bruto.
We don't have a Producto Nacional.
No, because we don't have very much transnationals and multinationals. You have to be a country with multinationals to go for the Producto Nacional Bruto variable, the gross national product variable, right? Because you add up what they do in Mexico, Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, in North America, everywhere. And that's your account as a company in the United States. And in Mexico, we count what General Motors does and what People does. You see? That's our national product. It's a dependent variable, we would say, right? I don't know which others are the producers. And look, he's talking about this resource-based view perceives a firm as a unique bundle of idiosyncratic resources and capabilities where the primary task of management is to maximize value to the optimal deployment of existing resources and capabilities while developing the firm's resource base for the future. Basada en recursos, that's one vision. So look, he puts forward, he's using 2 concepts. He's like defending, he's like exploring, he's analyzing the concept of what? Knowledge-based firms. But in this introduction, he's accounting for other concepts. The concept of resource-based firms. So he's making a differentiation right now between these 2. The emerging, el emergente, la perspectiva emergente, the emerging knowledge-based view is not as yet a theory of the firm in the first place. It's not a theory yet, right? But there is insufficient consensus as to its precepts or purpose. But of course, this is 1996. That's how many years ago? Yes. And maybe now we would have to go to very recent articles and books and see up to which point this has become a theory, the knowledge-based theory of the firm, right? But as knowledge is accumulative, we have to go back. What we're doing right now is reading roots. We have to go to the roots of things. You can do things just read out the new offers, but if you want to do a really nice research, if you want to construct a real nice conceptual framework, you have to go back. You have to go back to the roots. You have to go to Schumpeter, you have to go to Freeman, right? You have to go to Penrose, if you're doing patents, you know. You have to go to all these kinds of authors that set certain foundations. He talks about foundations, which is the next section. So he talks about these two perspectives of the firm. And then he starts with his idea of foundations. What did you find there in foundations? What are his foundations? What did you read about foundations? I found a lot of things on foundations. That's what he asked, well, he asked himself before, why a firm?
Then what is knowledge?
And then he asked himself, what is knowledge? Exactly. What is knowledge, Patricia, according to this author?
What is knowledge?
Yes, what does he say knowledge is? You can go there.
Which is
Here we are. Look, here it is. What is knowledge? And look what he answers himself. Since this question has intrigued some of the world's greatest thinkers from Plato to Popper, without the emergence of a clear consensus, look how he tackles this thing. It's real complex to define. Look, since Plato and Popper, there's no agreement. No, there's a debate. No, there's perspectives. No, but he says the following: I choose to compete. He says.
He chooses not to compete. This is not an arena
In which I
choose to compete. So he's disregarding this matter. So he doesn't have to go philosophical, in terms of discussing what knowledge is. And he just lands in saying, I offer beyond the simple tautology.
And what does he say?
That which is known.
That which is known.
So simple, very
Eso que se sabe.
so practical.
What is knowledge? ¿Qué es el conocimiento? That which is known. Eso que se sabe. Right? Very, very simple. But remember, his idea is that organization, or the firm, the enterprise, the private firm, is the organization of specialized knowledge, its integration into that organization, so that specialized knowledge is integrated finally in a product and a service. Right? That's why he's asking himself this. Right? It's not that knowledge has always been a basic input of any economic process, of transformation, of nature or things into another thing. The difference is the intensity of knowledge nowadays. This thing, for example, how much does this cost? What are the elements of cost of this thing? The plastics, the metals, all those kinds of things. No, the material parts, the materials. The cost, maybe 10%. That's it, no more than 10%. Right? Then we have, up to the half, the transaction costs. Transaction costs. And then the other half maybe is knowledge-based. Because in order to do this thing, for this thing to exist, we as humanity had to go through 250 years at least of science. This thing is a synthesis of those advances in the last 3 centuries of science. Without those advances, we could not have this thing. And this thing could not have been done 100 years ago. The pieces of knowledge necessary to build this thing, to conceive, to go from, look, you have to organize specialized knowledge. Where is the specialized knowledge? It's tacit knowledge. It's knowledge inside the individual. That's what I was talking about. Tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. Any document, any video, any audio is explicit knowledge. Right? That video that they're taping right there for us, right? It starts like tacit knowledge when I speak, but once it's on YouTube, it becomes explicit knowledge. It's codified. So a firm that organizes these specialized knowledge, what do they have to do? They have to give a contract to these specialized workers. They have the knowledge, right? They codify those knowledges and then they integrate them into the final product, right? Transaction costs. What are transaction costs? I said Materials, 10% of the cost. That would be the production cost. Production cost. And then I said, transaction costs would be 30%, 40%.
What do you mean with transaction?
What do you think I mean with transaction costs? That's another very important thing we should have to. The economists?
Bueno, is the cost to the firm, to the consumer, ¿no? Bueno, es el costo que desde que sale de la firma, bueno, de la empresa, hasta que llega al consumidor. Y todas las transacciones o mediadores que existen dentro de ese sistema, ese es el costo de transacción.
Exactly. Very well.
Es como el mercadeo.
Yeah. Transaction as cost of transaction as examples. What is your name again? Victor. Thank you, Victor. Capital plus labor will give us our production cost. That's inside the firm, as Victor was saying right now. Inside the firm. No, I contract workers. I buy capital, I rent capital, I have machinery, right? And I make shoes. So those shoes have a production cost, maybe 10 pesos. Right?
Capital is a material too?
What?
The capital, would it be
No.
material?
It depends what theory you're in.
Yes.
If you're in a neoclassical theory, capital is machinery.
But it doesn't take into account, what I mean is,
Yes,
if you're
the
making shoes, what happens with the leather, the plastic,
Look,
and all that?
the capital would be the machinery and the prime materials, and the other cost would be the workers, right? But if you're in a Marxist theory, capital is, in Spanish, valor que se valoriza a sí mismo. It's completely different, you see? It depends which neoclassical Marxist gains, who are you talking about, right? So that would take us to the idea of methodology. What is methodology? Methodology is the application, the concrete and practical application of a theoretical paradigm. If you want to measure capital and you're a neoclassical economist, you will think as a neoclassical economist that machinery is capital. But if you're a Marxist economist, you have to define capital in other terms. So your indicators, your profit, or the measurement of capital would be completely different. So there are different methodologies because they are different theories, right? These guys think that capitals are things, and these guys think that capitals are values. Right? So they're completely different concepts. So when you talk about a method, you have to link it, or you have to look for your umbrella. And your umbrella for any method you select must be a theory. Right? That's the idea of theory and methodology. Methodology has to feed itself from a paradigm. It has to have an umbrella. Right? And then under that umbrella, you define things in a certain way. Right? Oh, that hurt. And I think I went out of battery. I have no battery. Must have battery. What time is it? 3 o'clock. That's it.
Just in time.
We started. Look, I think that for the next session, we only have one session more. We have 3 hours. As you saw, I talked about a lot of things, but as you saw in relation to the readings we're doing, when you read, you have to be very specific. At least at the start. For example, we didn't even pass the introduction. Of course, the idea is to go through the questions, the paragraphs, how they're constructed, but the idea is that we have to go through one thing at least completely. We didn't even go to see the references. One thing I like to do when I read an article, I read the abstract, I read the introduction, and then I go to the references. And I start looking, oh look, he used this author. What is it called? Okay, this was, and you look at the references, and you're looking at the sources of that author, and that helps you a lot to build always a better text. So I think in an article you have to read everything, but you have to like speed it up. You have to learn like a method of reading, because you have to read a lot. You can't read them completely, those articles. You can't. It would be impossible, but you can have a technique. You know that an article has an abstract, and if that abstract is very well done, is very well written, you're going to understand the main idea about the article. It has an introduction. Normally, in these kind of articles, the introductions, what the authors do is that they present basic concepts, theoretical concepts. Other times, they present the main debate in a field around certain concepts, right? If they have a very little space, then they go on to, they use the introduction to present theoretical things. Then they go to a second part of the article where they present their method. Then they go to a third part where they present the results. And then they go to the last part, which many times is called discussion and conclusions, and that's it. Because remember that articles nowadays in these journals are 6,000 to 9,000 words. And some very good journals with a little bit more space are 12,000 words, and that's it. So you always have, in most of these journals, you have always this idea. Introduction. Some of them present a second section with theories, right? Then the method, then the results, and then the conclusion. And of course, the references at the end. And that's the complete thing, right? From the start to the end. So when you're reading, you have to, okay, I saw that the main concepts is managing are these. I like the photocopies because I can do this. I love photo because on books it's like, to scribble on a book is horrible. It's like violating that book, right? It should be clean and beautiful. And this, you get a photocopy from your PDF, so you can spin it around, you can write all over it, and you can tag things. So you can see, and when I have certain articles that are important, I go with these kinds of mental maps, right? For example, here I put in the center the foundations of the article. What did I find? Well, what is knowledge? He talks about transferring knowledge. He talks about aggregating knowledge. He talks about appropriating knowledge. He talks about specialized knowledge. And he talks about production knowledge. That's the essence of this part of foundation. And he gives definitions for each one, right? Because the thing is that when you have tacit knowledge in the people, inside the persons, how are you going to transfer that? Inside the firm to the others. What type of communication? What type of language would you like to use? Right? So, the idea for the next class would be basically if you could select one of these articles and read, not all the article, but read certain parts with very precisely, with much detail, and scribble on a page and make this an idea of what in that part is the author trying to communicate, and up to where do you understand. You have 3 articles. They are all about knowledge management. All 3 articles are very important because they have a lot of citations. This one by Grant, you saw it. I put 4,000, I don't know how many citations, but in the last book in Web of Science, we did 8,000 citations. You know, that's a lot of citations. What does that mean? That Grant is a foundational author in the case of knowledge management in the strategic management literature. And that's a process that you will have to repeat every day. Because that's what a postgraduate studies program is all about, studying. So that will be reading in English most of your literature and trying to extract from that literature the main points. Okay? So I'll see you next Thursday? Right here? No, no, it's Wednesday? Thursday. Okay? And we'll try to work, I don't know if we can go to an agreement on that those 3 readings could be like distributed between you. Not all of you doing the same one. As a group, some do 1, some do 2, and some do 3. Right? But they're okay because these are things that you have a course called Management of Knowledge. So once you read these things, when you get to that course in your 3rd trimester, that will be the 3rd trimester, right? You already have 3 basic, highly cited readings on the topic of knowledge management, or knowledge management of knowledge, however you want to call it. Okay? See you next Thursday. Thank you very much. Pleased to meet you. And hopefully, I will see you all in our master program from September on. Okay? Thank you.